it, and we love that. So anyway, says I'm Shana Nys Dambrot, I'm an art critic, etc. here in LA. Obviously, Linda Smith will be your artist today. And I had the pleasure of working on an essay for a book for the show. So what I have to say, even as somebody who has been a fan of Linda's ceramics, I have read cats, cat people, vessel, and now a new totem in my home. Even with that level of appreciation and fan and friendship, it really wasn't until I showed up at the studio to work on the essay and prepare for the exhibition that even I really understood the situation with the painting practice that had come before the ceramics. So just on a personal note, I completely love that I feel like this show is really the first major time in Los Angeles where people are able to see them both together. It's just mad about all the cats. And so that just right off the bat, I think is a really exciting thing. So as we're going to go through and talk a little bit about it and this idea of power and pattern, motif and repetition and the symbolism and the fact that people have been painting, like the two things humans have been painting since they first started painting were like each other and spirit animals, right? And obviously, cats are one of those kind of mystical creatures in that, but it just seems like a really interesting opportunity to delve kind of all the way back to the beginning and to talk about the paintings, to talk about your relationship to pattern and color, and then to talk about your move into ceramics and why, why it's been mainly ceramics lately, but even with new ceramics and older paintings, the connections are so incredibly clear in the curation of this show. So Linda, I guess maybe if we could just start a little bit at the beginning, like tell people a little bit about the scope. I'll mention that this is covered kind of 40 years of your work. If you could just talk a little bit about, in terms of what we're looking at, like what came first and how it all played out for you.
Well, that was in the 80s. I started, I came to LA from New York. I'm from New York, so I had this figurative background. I learned drawing and painting, and a focus was always on figures in art school, and that was my focus. And I came out here and I saw, the color in LA was so striking. The beauty of LA was incredible, just in awe, coming from New York City. So anyway, that was an early painting. I did in the 80s. And I have a lot of pattern here too. But I was always involved with pattern and line. I always like to flatten things out. Like I tried to do animation, but it's terrible because I want to flatten everything. And it didn't work.
No, that's not why.
But I mean, like, anyway, because I went to film school and I tried to be a filmmaker for a little while, but I was not passionate. So I went back to painting. So that's where I started.
So we're talking about New York in like late 70s or
late 70s.
So the pattern decoration movement was in full swing.
That was always like Krishna. Anyway, yeah. But even before that, I looked at the chiefs in Picasso. I grew up with all that. And when I love the juxtaposition. I think also, I think it's genetic sometimes, like the Russian background, intense colors. I sometimes feel like the taste was, like I was always attracted to intense music. Stuff like that. So even now I paint sometimes, I put a jazz on it. Even John Lurie. But anyway, to make a thing back to the artwork, it was always a concern. And I used my imagination and it was fun. I there. by the beach, and that was an early work. And then, and around the same time, I did, I think the Tree of Life over there was the first book. And it was like a biblical thing, Adam and Eve. So.
LA is the Garden of Eden.
Yeah,
Sure.
but also, there's a snake there, and the heads, and it's sort of, I always had this thing with heads, even in high school, like, my music teacher for a painting, I was very curious, they had heads. So I was always, a place to go. And then I did, a bunch of, paintings, on the wall on the left with mother and child. Because I was in my 30s or late 20s, and I was thinking about, children and everything. And I just got into this very intricate patterns. I love them. It all reminds me of the Guatemalan kind of quilt.
Yes, and then there's like a little bit of that sort of Aboriginal dot painting and the landscape elements. And I love what you said about the Russian folklore, especially in the Tree of Life one, where like we all have no trouble imagining that sort of flat schematic folk tableau, right? Of the figures in this pomegranate tree or whatever that is, like that's a very archetypal. Yeah, I love that sort of Central European folk influence.
And I used a lot of blue and negative space to probably take it over, so do that. Sometimes I fill it up and then I fill in and so
but at this time it's painting. You weren't working in certain.
I didn't even know that play. I didn't even care about play. When I went to art school, there was a play studio across the street from the Grats Gallery of Buffalo. I never even walked in there. I was like, play, who needs ceramics? But it was sort of, I kind of regret that. I spent too much time with too much coffee. But anyway, I majored in painting. I did sculpture once in a while. I remember it was sculpture. No, the focus was painting. I studied at State University of New York at Buffalo, Drumovich, and Seymour Drumovich was a painter, and he didn't like it. He thought, Seymour, you're up. He thought I was painting too feminine. That was his kind of. But anyway, he was a nice guy, but he had his point of view. But I didn't, when I was going to art school, we didn't even know the word gallery. They wouldn't even talk that. So I was just always focused on doing work, good work. And then I got into film school after that because I didn't know what to do with myself. So I got into the best film school in the country. I said, well, I'll try that. And then
I'm curious, and I don't want to digress too hard, but since you did bring up Seymour's attitude, when you were at NYU Film School in the 70s, what was the situation with female students, professors, how close to zero?
It wasn't too bad, but it was 7 women and 21 guys. It was a very small graduate school.
I mean, it's better than being, I guess, the only women.
Yeah, but it was still difficult for me because the women's movement was going on. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted to be like a guy and lift everything. I was like being really stupid, immature. I didn't understand. You can't do everything. And I wasn't used to that. So, but I didn't have a passion for film. I had more passion for film. I had done a little animated film to get into NYU before, and I thought maybe it was a way to go.
I could see that though. I mean, seeing some of the impulses in the paintings, I could absolutely, it's not very difficult at all to imagine any of these works suddenly going into an animation place. I mean, there's so much movement of the eye, obviously. There's so much treatment of like every possible square centimeter or let's say pixel of the frame. You know, I do completely understand why the sensibility that produced these paintings could be interested in animation. Like if it were easy enough to do, which I guess there probably is now, that there are like AI programs that you can take a picture of that and tell it to animate it.
Yeah.
I don't know, great, I don't know
Well,
how much like what you want it would turn out, but like that idea that you already have enough energy and enough elements and enough movement and enough narrative in these pictures
Sure.
to launch an animation and a little bit of a story, I think it's all right there. So that actually makes a lot of sense to me, that you would have been kind of playing on both sides of that, even if you didn't fully realize it.
Mm-hmm. Also, when I was there were beautiful animated films from Yugoslavia where they draw. It was the Grand Studios, I think it was called. It was beautiful, you know, it was fabulous. But so I was kind of torn between that film and painting, but I went, it was easier to be in my apartment painting and try to deal with the film business. So I went back to that, and then happily.
And then you come to LA and you're already interested in intense color and palette, obviously. You come to LA and you find an environment and the way that people are being that to my mind, feeds into that and amplifies it. And so you keep on with the painting, and even more so.
And when I was very, very lucky. I mean, I started painting. I was living with my cousin, and I didn't paint much then. And then I got my place, and I started painting. And then I put a portfolio together. And like the first week, I got a gallery in near Target, and it was this gallery from Mexico City. There, anyway, they became really good friends, Antonio. And they also brought up Frida Kahlo. I mean, they knew Mrs. Almeida. Anyway, they were great friends, and from them, I had some strong relationships with my printer, Victor Santoyo. So that opened up a lot of doors, even though the gallery closed after a year. But it was wonderful. I formed wonderful friendships from that. And then Victor he did beautiful serigraphs, a whole bunch of editions for me. Then he worked with Frank Romero and Carlos Almaraz. I mean, he was a wonderful printer. So I've been lucky. I've been exhibiting since the 80s. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's that kind of story where it's like, oh, this is where my people have been. Like they weren't necessarily in Buffalo. They super definitely were not in Washington Square Park. But then it turns out that like the bohemian fringe of Beverly Hills, like those are your people. Yeah. And like right when you start. I mean, that's kind of the magic of what happens, I think, in LA too. I know for a fact there's a lot of people in this room and things like that happen too, myself included. And it's I think it's part of what the city at least was about at that time. But I also, when you just said Frank Romero, I'm like, yeah, I see it. Like you should be in a program with Frank.
I showed with
absolutely there.
I showed with him and Sharon.
Yeah.
At the Craft and now it was Cafe in the shop.
In my heart, it will always be condemned. I love that, but it's so ingrained, but yes.
Anyway, back in 2005, 2006, Stella Creative was running the show. And she gave me a show with Frank, and it was fabulous. They had a fabulous opening of food and everything. It was just so wonderful for me. Such a celebration. And from that show, I was invited to the first solo show at the Beatrice Woods Center.
So by then you were making ceramics.
Yes, I transitioned already. That was already.
Just quickly, like how?
I skipped about 20 years.
No, but was that like one day you met someone? Was it like everything else, something just kind of personal serendipity, or did it come from your idea that you sought out a place? Like what was the first thing that made you go, well, this ceramic studio I'm going to go into?
Well, what happened was I started doing mosaics because I got for the painting. I just wanted to do something else. So I started buying like commercial tile, and then I also have some of this tile which I paint on. And then it was too hard for me to do. Yeah, I just couldn't. It was too difficult. I mean, I love drawing and painting, so I didn't have that, you know, largesse about, you know, the mosaics. So I started doing green hair, you know, you call it my kind of stuff. There's a place I drive to in Culver City here. And then I wanted to learn hand building, and I studied and worked on for 2 years. And Charles Sherman was always there with me, my friend Charles is the one. And we were in the back room doing slabs, and everybody else was doing the wheel. So that was 2 years. Then I went to my own studio, and I started hand building. But I always was a painter. In my heart, I'm a painter. So I like simple shapes, and that I can, you know, play with. And you know, I'm very fortunate to be able to do this.
So right away, your relationship with ceramics was always, at least partly, if not largely, about another kind of surface to paint on or with. It wasn't like some people they want to leave the two-dimensional practice on and make things in a different way. But for you, it really was an extension. Like there was never not painting on the ceramics, the painting that you made.
Very important to me. Very, very important to have like the themes. The themes, I sometimes they be more intricate, and I have like figures, like flying figures on the ceramics. But I enjoyed it because I got so bored just doing a flat surface. And then the clay thing is so wonderful. Working with clay, even though sometimes it's a pain, you know, it's a process. You learn. It was more interesting to me. So. You know, there's a whole play community.
And then at some point, obviously, it went from being not just, but you know, a surface, the elements of the totem, you know, a vessel, whatever, and quickly became freestanding figures as well. But again, painting. So okay, there's a figure of a woman, but her sleeve tattoos are an opportunity for you, or just the abstraction and the pattern on the head. And then that, you know, when we were having the Calla conversation, it was really amazing, like the influences that are so evident, but that are in no way like copied, but like an Saint Paul and her relationship to pattern and the body. And it's, yes, it's a sculpture of a woman, but it's obviously about what's going on the surface as well, just as much. And that whole thing. And so the first solo show at Beatrice Woods Art Center.
Yeah, it was fabulous. It was, you know, it was magic.
Yeah.
Number one, that place is incredible. It was a big history. Duchamp was there. I mean, everybody came. I met her when she was about 100. I went up there with a friend.
And she was a half person as well, just not for nothing.
I realized that.
Yeah, all of her cats are very like gravestones around the property and stuff. Like she gave them little ceramic grave.
I had no clue that I was going to be showing you later. You know. But anyway, when I met Kevin, he gave me I was the first solo show in the Logan House. That was amazing. So it's very magical. You can still see the show online.
Yeah, and Kevin's still there.
Yeah, oh yeah, I mean, that's it. Yeah, and he and Cheryl, yeah, they're great. And so that was exciting, and I got to use her glazes too. I went to the studio, and I was like spiritual moment to take out her glaze and put it in. I had it in two sculpt on a couple of sculptures. So that was incredible. But I love going up there. It was so wonderful. It's like it's so beautiful up there. And then her history, folk art. But
that must have been very validating for you as well. Like the ceramics still partly experimental based on the timeline. You're doing them, but you're kind of, if this is 16 years ago, so you're 16 fewer years if you're of getting expert at the medium, right? So it's early in the process, but somebody like that recognizes
I know,
power of it.
it was amazing because I hadn't been doing it that way. And I always felt like I didn't go to Alfred or something with ceramic saying, it's like the mecca of ceramics in New York, art school, and it's State University of Buffalo.
I didn't even go into the ceramic studio.
No, no, I just negated the whole thing, and I didn't even know that ceramics. I didn't even think about it. So,
but then when it entered your life, it was like the next perfect thing.
like an addiction.
That makes sense to me because the mosaics are really interesting, and obviously I think there's ways in which you're using the tiles in a similar way that you're creating abstract patterns, in the work with brushes, and I get the appeal. But at the same time, what you were saying about it lacking that sort of like gestural immediacy of satisfaction of painting, but it does make a really nice kind of, connective place between the painting and the ceramics. Like you were trying to work out something a little bit more physical that was more than painting, quote unquote, but that wasn't, but there was no painting, so that wasn't going to work out. So that, in that context, I think the rise of ceramics in your practice makes a lot of sense. So since then, as I started out saying, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but you've mostly been then showing the ceramics.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what people know, like the ceramicist. Nobody even says painter and sculptor because most people haven't seen these paintings before.
They've been hiding in my closet.
Well, I
It's
still
not
got
my
their
closet, in
house,
my bedroom. I have a second bedroom.
the racking room. But so how are you feeling about having them all meet the world again for the first time?
I think it's magical and wonderful. I love it. I just love it. And this is such a wonderful experience. I'm pinching myself. It's great at this point in my life. Yeah. I've been doing it since I'm a kid, art. So to get validated like this is just wonderful.
I love that for you. And it is addictive. Like, people, there's like two kinds of people. They have no art of yours, or they have like 6 pieces of art of yours. There's nobody I know has one, right? Like that's not even, you can't stop. You've been warned. We have a first-time collector over here. I'm just letting you know. Yeah, there's still time. Because they want each other too, because there's so much personality in the figures, the people and the cats, and that installation in the corner is sort of inside of at the studio. You have a cabinet or flat pile in your living room, and there's like 30 of them, and it really goes to that sort of like Forbidden City clay army warrior place, right? Which is insane and absurd and so absolutely joyful. And I think that, I definitely want to talk a little bit about, it may seem like an obvious question, but I know that it's a little bit like everything with you, there's also a huge depth to it. Cats and people, mainly women. And, one does not have that kind of focus for this long without it meaning something to you. It's not just another cat. Every cat's a cat. They're schematic, and there's a consistency to the look, but every face is a different person. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your relationship to kind of, having that subject and going kind of deep and long on cats, on that subject.
Particularly the cats.
I'm a cat person, that's how I am, but I think that, it's a great place to start. We can talk about the people too if you want.
Well,
We're all here for the
yeah,
cats.
I love my cats. Anyway, there's very spiritual animals. Like when I went to London once and I've been to the museum and I saw cat mummies and things. I started crying because cats have always been worshipped. And when I grew up not even knowing really about cats, and they came to me. All my animals came to me. They came to my door. You know, my cat. They were all strings. But when I work on cats, it's funny sometimes. I don't even when I'm drawing them. They're very. I just incise the line and I draw. And each little cat has a different expression. Sometimes they come out angry, sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're nifty. I don't even know how they come from. It's like you're giving birth to something, you know what I mean? But it's then I look at them and I say, oh, what color should I make you? Black and white. Then I look at reference to other cats, and I love the Japanese cats. I'm very influenced by that. You know, I can't say right, so you know, I have a book out when my hands are up. I showed them Japan. I brought my stuff to. That was fun.
But I mean, you know, Japan is another one of those, like, if you look at the sort of Asian printmaking and the ink drawings, there's a cat in every
I love,
scene.
you know, it's just amazing.
The Renaissance, they had dogs. In Japan, they had cats in all of the classical work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just, with my work, it's a vehicle too for me. Like, when I get burned out about stuff, I can always do a cat. Like, it's always fun to do a cat. You know, they're small, I can do it quickly in my hand. You know, I try doing, I'm used to doing them. And they're fun. To go from small work to big work. And then I get, sometimes I want to work scripts. Like the other day, I was starting with a cat and I ended up with some English in that script. Because I just did, my hands couldn't do it, or the clay wouldn't work. Sometimes the clay tells you what to do. It's just, it's interesting. Working. I'm sure when you paint or draw it, sometimes you create your energy goes a certain direction. So with the cats, it's like a thing I can make, you know, over and over. It gives me satisfaction that I can accomplish. You start to do that, and you're small and they drive fast.
But it reminds me a little bit too of, like, okay, should I say this? It's just gonna date me, but you know, for anyone in this room who remembers the movie Witches of Eastwick, right? Cher's character was a sculptor, and she made like 1,000 tiny Venus of Willendorfs, and she couldn't explain why she just kept wanting to make this form. And there was like an army of them, maybe different sizes, and it was a very funny, very folksy, but very serious spiritual thing. And she, you know, and I've never kind of forgotten that, because I've always thought that that was, you know, an interesting choice for the, you know, for the film. But like, since subsequently, when I think of it, whenever I encounter an artist who has a similar impulse like that, like, I've been doing this for years, I still get so much satisfaction out of it. No, I'm not remotely sick of making cats. If you guys weren't here, I'd be making a cat right now, right? And so that is not how every artist is. That's, you know, a fairly unique way of approaching your subject and your medium. And it's notable because I feel like it has that kind of folk ritual quality to it, you know? I don't want to shove it in a box like it's a very serious practice, because it's whimsical, but it does have absolutely that dimension.
But also, my cat has been like a support thing for me. So it's like my family. I mean, I hate to say it.
No, you can say it. There's people nodding.
But so it's, you know, I'm very affected by that whole thing. And so it's an emotional thing when I do the cats too. Yeah, because I'm so, you know, in love with it. It's part of my life. I think that's, and then I combine it with color and pattern.
And it's a similar relationship too with the people. It's like, you know, they're schematic, they're stylized. They've probably some of them, if you said to me who it was based on and I knew the person, I would then see it. But I would imagine a lot of it is also kind of invented or based on, you know, somebody's face that's floating around in your mind from however long ago. Not quite generic because they're all different. I love like the one guy with a mask, just to let you know that like, yes, this was made in 2021, you know, but like basically they're pretty timeless. And like, especially, you know, if you look at this one, the woman with the red skin and the blue hair and the orange cap, where they really are kind of side by side. You know, the women, their eyes are a little cat-like, their eyes are a little human. So you really start to kind of see like a blended kind of spirit between the people and the animals, which I think is just one more thing that goes back to what some of the folk art kind of roots that you were talking about.
Sure. And I keep the faces sometimes androgynous because people that did it, male, female, and even back then, you know, when I went to film school, this being a woman was confusing. I mean, what is my role? You know, so much pressure, so many avenues about being a woman. Or man, or whatever, but like sometimes I keep them, I want to keep them
More ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous, but make it more universal.
Well, I think that's a really good point too, and it's sort of like because the colors are not skin tones per se, it also takes it to that kind of more universal, like these people.
Sure.
You know, they're not any specific kind of people, they're every kind of person, they're whatever kind of person you see, right? Yourself, or, you know, they're familiar but strange, you know, and I think that there's something, you know, it's really interesting to me how the pattern operates in that way too, right? Like the way you were talking about things being flattened out on the canvas, but then no matter what you do, you can't flatten out this giant piece of hand manipulated clay. So, but yet you can a little bit when you clothe the dimensional objects in this kind of heavy patterning. It does kind of flatten it out and make it a little bit more like a picture of an object. So it does this really interesting back and forth because it's very clear that you're dealing with a ceramic sculpture, but to my mind, you're kind of absorbing it like you're looking at a painting.
Sure.
Anyway.
Sure. Very painterly point of view. That's why I like the simple shapes because it allows me the freedom to just have fun with it. You know? But I do plan, like the big stuff, I do plan out a little bit as far as the color. The size, the shape, I have to make sure they work together.
Yeah, no, they're amazing. And by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but if anyone has any questions, just like go ahead. Like we're not gonna wait till then. Do that. Yes.
Which cat is your
Oh yeah,
Which
which
one
cat's
was
your
most
cat?
like
Oh, which cat's my cat?
Which one was most like
I think the orange and the white, Bobby.
He's like, what is the cat?
Yeah, but he's a bobtail. He has no, and he's a Japanese bobtail, and it's like orange. But I use him.
But it's true because I think there is a thing where people like, for me, on the one hand, I want a cat that looks like my cat because oh my god, I love my cat, oh my god. But on the other hand, you love them all because of the elements of them that are like the painting, right? So it's like nobody owns, or maybe they do, but like a bright red cat, say, but there's something incredible, like you love what that solid color is doing with the shape. Or a cat this big, which would be absolutely terrifying, because this is like, you know, Siegfried and bright white tiger level white, okay? But at the same time, it's somehow not disturbing that it's a cat head. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm working through all these little paradoxes in your work where like, there's so much information that it should be overwhelming, but it's not. and there's, you know, something that could be a little haunting, but it's joyful. And it could be way too much, but it's perfect. Like that thing with you that's always kind of a little back and forth between those places is what I love. I do. So, one more question. Are you still making paintings and things?
I want to.
So no.
At the moment, I'm gonna.
But is this kind of what made you?
But
want to
actually, these
do?
are pretty recent, they're 2018.
Okay.
I mean, and I want to paint, but I have to buy the canvases and I have to set it up, and I need the tape. And I have to get more room in my studio, I have to like, but
What happened in your dog?
Oh yeah, the occasional dog's allowed.
oh yeah, I had a dog, but, okay. All my animals come to me. I don't have, I was doing a big painting in 1999. And I said it needed some. So I drew a dog. 3 days later, a stray dog comes under my house and walk in there. It looked just like the dog in my painting. It was like I was calling for this dog. It was so amazing. That's Priscilla. She was with me. She was a pit that Staffordshire next to her. And she had a dog in there, so I fixed her leg. She became my dog. And I always thought of dogs. She was, but anyway, she was great. So I had her, and then I had cats. I had cats. They got along. They had my cats and my dog. But all the animals come to me. So not so much lately, but like Bobby was a stray. He was very social.
Well, you've said that now, and so we are all gonna follow up with you to see how many new cats have showed up at your house by next weekend. Because I'm pretty sure it's gonna be at least one. So let me know when that happens. But I mean, in all seriousness, like, you know, this is what I love to do, is like pull things apart, but like, we're talking about this sort of like low-key ritual magic and the intuition and the elements, you know, from history and other cultures that are speaking to you, and it, you know, how even a lot of the choices of what media you've actually worked in, it's all exceptionally intuitive for you. And I feel like that would then result in a few of these little spirit demons showing up at your front door. It actually makes perfect sense to me, right? And for those of us that, I mean, most of the time, it's animals do choose us, right? They come to you. My current cat I saw in a dream, and then I got a phone call 3 days later. Like that kind of stuff happens with our animals all the time, and I'm kind of a believer in what the kind of little magical vibrations that's manifesting. Like I believe that. You know, I think so. So on the way to winding down, because unbelievably we've been talking for like almost 45 minutes to do that. I know, because it's so much fun. Okay, but so question. Did the pandemic make you want to paint people more? Was that, or is that not it? Because I know for a lot of artists, even maybe artists who didn't go into the pandemic as figurative artists or portrait painters, that the pronounced absence of other people has led to a profusion, the fruits of which we're now seeing in every gallery and museum, of figurative art. And a lot of people talk about how they couldn't get to their studio, or they couldn't get to the art store, whatever it was. They couldn't go out, so they started painting their friends from memory, whatever it is. But that it's a huge kind of thing that happened. And because I'm seeing these totem works that are very much obviously recent and very much covered in humans, was that a thing for you, or did you not really think about it?
I wasn't that conscious of it. I've always been doing heads, like at the show I had at Features with a whole series of heads. But when I think about it, everybody was on a Zoom meeting, so maybe that unconsciously.
So it's like a stack of Zoom squares. And by the way, the best part of every Zoom is what? Thank you. The pet, deciding during the meeting too. Clearly, that was what made Zoom bearable, was getting to see each other's pets wandering into your brain. So, but that actually makes me laugh, but that's, yeah, we saw everybody from here up for 2 years.
Yeah, it was good, but all, I think maybe it was that, but also like, I'm used to TV, the big shot, going to film school, close up, so like close up.
I love that. No, we do. They're really beautiful. And I think, I know how much work, I mean, you've been showing and selling, but you are insanely prolific. You work and make every day. So to say that there's a lot of work at your studio, it's not because there's also not a lot of work at collector's house, which there is. There's just also a lot in the studio. So definitely props to what you and Om were able to do curating the show, because I think that it really does an amazing job of explaining so much of what's active in the ceramics and where that comes from, and just also because these paintings are absolutely, they're just amazing.
Thank you.
And they're so alive, but then they're so eccentric, right? Like the palette is a little bit to one side so that they stay strange even while they have all this energy. And I think, it's really great to see so many of them in one place, and should really be able to understand that about you as an artist.
And also when this was at Spargo, so.
This was the one at Swago.
This is my Spargo painting.
Swago in the house.
The yellow cat is I've been like staring at that yellow cat the whole time.
People loved it. It was fun to see.
Yeah, which is amazing. So LA history too.
But it's
I'm
funny.
not here to sell you art, but that's a piece of LA history, is all I'm saying.
But it's funny how I had cats there too, even before I had a cat.
Yeah. Yeah, but I absolutely love it. I love the way that the pattern takes so much patience, but it's also, when you get up on it, so loose and gestural still, so that it's, I mentioned the Aboriginal textile, but there's an insane mathematical precision that they have that I don't think is what's really interesting to you. These are really still brush strokes for you, even if it's more than mark painting. Like when you get up on it, you can really see your hand in there. So that looseness, I think, separates it from some of the folk art. Most of the folk art that I'm familiar with has that crispness, because it's like a borderline illustration quality to what it's promoting, and this is much more of that kind of gestural abstract.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And I had fun with it,
oh, that radiates the fun. No, the joy that took place in your studio continues to radiate off the work, and that is, it can be explicated, such as we've been doing for the last 40 minutes, but it doesn't need to be. It's also very pure energy of joy that comes to the work as well. So, but like joy, but enough eccentricity that it's still kind of adult. Does that make sense? Like, it's pure, but it's not like childlike. Yeah. It's the joy in here like comes like from some shit. You know what I mean? Like you've seen some stuff. This is like a person in light, and there's distress and mottled surfaces and little scars and things that line up, so that there's things that are like a little bit more mature and more disturbing. And like, I don't want to say darkness because I don't really see darkness, but just like, it's not just pure whimsy. It's not just like running through a field of buttercups. There's also emotion and, aging and life going on under there while all of that joy is happening on the surface, which for me, I think, makes the experience even deeper.
Yeah, it's a struggle, when you're painting, it's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
When you're trying to work it out, you have all this emotional stuff that you're working out with the painting, with the figure, that was like my print, I was in a relationship with the skeleton creature over there. very, you know, and then I broke through, and that's breaking through, like, yeah. You know, and that I did, I had a big painting, so this print was after a big painting, and actually that print was after a big painting too, so that was a series I did. And they kind of work together, it's like free.
Yeah, no, I love that sort of like out the vortex going on with the green.
And I have big paintings of that.
Yeah, and they're exceptional. I mean, they have the qualities that you would expect as paintings. Although, you know, there's also, as you mentioned, a lovely printmaking tradition in LA, especially with the artists that you mentioned, especially. So, and I think there is something about a lot of, not all of these, but most of your work that I think, you know, lends itself to well-executed printmaking. The pattern, the color, the distinctness of the shapes, I think is something that printmaking could really.
I love print.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, and I'm glad that there's examples of those too, so we all know, like, also available. No, but seriously, because this is like the kind of work that, you know, the more mediums that it can exist in, I think it just expands the conversation, right? It's not like they're separate conversations. The paintings, ceramics, and the prints are all having the same conversation. And I think that's just interesting too, to know that it's the sensibility that's informing how you're working with all the different mediums, that it's all you from one place, rather than say, you know, a material exploration or something like that. Like it's just even more new, which is worth celebrating. Because you seem so lovely, and then this
Thank you
is what's
so
going on
much.
there.
Thank you so much.
Right, I like that. Brilliant. It's like, so this is what it looks like inside your head. Cool. I like it. Brilliant, Linda. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Really special.
You're wonderful. Thank you.
Enjoy. Last call for questions.
I'm curious about your colors.
Oh, the colors.
The colors. I mean, I didn't grow up in LA. I grew up in that part of the desert. These big desert valleys. This is and so my color experience growing up, you know, peripherally was this bland. And I was curious about how you grew up in New York, so that was kind of the foundation, and then you came to LA. Was that like a turn around in your head?
I always was into color. I was always, and I'm from New York, everything was very
So
intense
even
and
in New
colorful.
York,
Even in New York, but here, I think it's just with the sunlight every day all the time, and the weather's so beautiful and beautiful, and it just exploded here, you know. And in New York, okay, I was young, and I think I started more. I painted in college, and for a few years I painted a little bit in New York City, but they were kind of. They weren't like this. I mean, they were more dismal in New York. Yeah, a little more like this in the city.
Like everything.
City. And I was just dabbling there. And then I came out here, and the color in California is so amazing. I mean, flowers, the bougainvillea, I mean, so it was great. Yeah, so I'm sure that if I coming here, I changed my whole vocabulary. In New York, you know, I mean, everybody's in New York with black and white. Everybody's more formal there sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, the black, white, gray thing is real. Mike.
I have a question about your children.
Sure.
I know that you have planned that, but there are still options that you could alternate or twist.
Oh, sure.
Each one a different way. Does it take on a new life?
Okay, sometimes
Or assembling them, or-
when I'm assembling them, sometimes I have to switch them out, or I have to add another one, and it's tall enough. You know, so I stack it because I can't, well, when I was doing these, I didn't have an assistant to help me put this square, you know, high. So I would just do 2 or 3 at a time. And then I plan out, I have test colors. So I try to figure out what color goes with what. I didn't want to have red on red, you know, I wanted to have it. Or I kept it cohesive, you know, consistent with the blues and the whites. But these blue dots kept the whole thing kind of together. But as far as shapes, sometimes I have to rearrange it or make another one or something if it didn't work. Like the tops, like I had options for tops, I could make an orange top or like it. So sometimes I have extra pieces. So I put them together. But normally, typically I try to work stack them. So, you know, you put the whole one. I'm not meticulous about that because they're kind of funky. But, you know,
But they're structurally sound
oh yeah, totally.
now.
Believe me.
Right,
There's a steel bar.
right, but they come apart. So are you asking, could they be reconfigured at a later time easily?
Not really. No, I wouldn't, you might be able to, but sometimes it doesn't work as well. They work best this way. When I did them, I tried to keep them the way they were.
You went through, in other words, all that already, like you moved it all around, and at that point it was intuitive
And
to arrive at the final stage.
occasionally it didn't work, like some of that, but flat enough, or too big, so you have to rearrange, but, or do it differently. Most of the time I do the hand building, and then I handle on top, you know, to make a hole and handle. So, and then I carve into it, and then the greenware. It's not dry yet. And then you let it dry, and then you fire it, and then you can stack it. Easily, more easily. And then I paint 2 or 3 at a time. Not that, when I say at a time. And I see what works. You know, test tiles. I love, you know, this was a big breakthrough for me to do these tiles. I did one years ago. And Nancy really has it. That wasn't an outfit. I stopped, and then this was wonderful to have these bigger works. It was very expensive. It's a challenge. And it's exciting to have big work next to small work.
Yeah, it's very satisfying, and the scale, the way it relates to the body is very satisfying. There's no doubt about that.
Trees to walk through.
Pardon me?
There are trees to walk through.
You like
Yeah.
the forest. Yeah, you can do a lot. I mean, you know, all you have to do is make like 100 of them, but then, no, but seriously, like it's one of those things like that where, you know, one absolutely has this kind of power on its own. A few of them, you start to wonder if you stumbled on some kind of site, if there's meaning, you know, and, but like everyone in here would have, we can all imagine in our minds what like the field of them would be, or just like, you know, the more and more of them, just like with the cats, a small army of them, like there really is something that it's like never too much.
Get pregnant.
It's gonna be back.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Exactly. So get back to work. Get back in the studio. No, again, massive congratulations. And thanks to all of you for coming and for waiting.
Thank you.